is the 2022 Porsche Taycan GTS Sport Turismo, and it is an exceptionally cool wagon. Wagons used to be uncool, but they're coming back, and this is proof. It's all electric, it has almost 600 horsepower, and it's a thrill to drive. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And you should, because we've had some fantastic sales recently, including this BMW 320iS brought over $45,000, a wonderful rare car. This BMW M3 sedan brought $43,000, a great E90, and this Porsche 944 Turbo sold for $54,000 with low mileage. We've really had some great sales and success on Cars and Bids, so check it out if you're looking to buy or sell a cool modern enthusiast car with daily auctions. carsandbids.com. So let's talk Taycan GTS Sport Turismo. First, let's break down that name. Taycan, Porsche's four-door electric car. I reviewed it back when it first came out now more than 2 years ago. Sport Turismo, that's Porsche speak for wagon, which this is. The GTS part is new. This is a performance model of the Taycan intended for people who want something a little more than a regular Taycan, but they don't want to pay up for the Taycan Turbo. And indeed, this fits right in the middle, and today I'm going to show you exactly why. First, I'll take you on a quick tour of the Taycan GTS Sport Turismo, and I'll show you some of its quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Taycan GTS Sport Turismo. Now, I've already reviewed 2 different Taycan models, so I'm not going to go over everything, but I am going to hit the highlights, starting with one of the quirkiest quirks I have ever seen, and that would be the panoramic roof in this car. It allows you to select the level of transparency that you want. Now, I've already shown you similar roof designs in McLaren models and the Toyota Venza, strangely enough, but this is way quirkier than any of those. All right, starting, you can see the panoramic roof is pretty normal. You can see out of it, it just looks like a big glass panel. But if you press the closed tab on this screen in the infotainment system, then instantly it becomes closed. You can't see out of it at all, and you can go between open and closed and see just how quickly this happens. No more waiting for like a big sunshade to roll on or roll off the sunroof. Instead, instantly open or close. That's pretty cool. But it gets even quirkier than that, because you can select just how much of the roof you want to be transparent or opaque. Check this out. You slide your finger over this image of the car from the top down, and the roof corresponds to what you do. So you can have half the roof be transparent or 3/4 of the roof be transparent or whatever, and you can see just how quickly it responds in real time. It is amazing to watch this happen. You slide your finger forward or backwards and the roof does the exact same thing that you have just asked it to do. And it still gets quirkier because there are 2 different dimming modes that are offered by this roof. If you press dimming 1, then like half of the panels become transparent and half of them become opaque in this sort of odd pattern. If you press dimming 2, then exactly the opposite happens. The ones that were transparent are now opaque, and vice versa, and that's the way the roof works in this car. Probably the coolest transparent configurable panoramic roof I have ever seen in any vehicle. Frankly, the only drawback to this transparent roof is that when you're selecting just how much you want it to be open or closed, you have to start from the back and go forward, meaning you can't have it transparent in the front and opaque in the back. You're starting in the back and increasing the transparency as you go forward. And that's kind of a disappointment, because if you have kids in the back you want to shield from the sun, but you want sun up front, well, you can't do that. But that's the only drawback in this otherwise fantastical and ridiculous roof design. But there is oh so much more to cover when it comes to the Taycan GTS. So let's talk about the important stuff. The GTS is positioned between the Taycan 4S and the Taycan Turbo. In the Taycan Taycan model range. Now the 4S has 560 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. This, the GTS, has 590 horsepower and 625 pound-feet, and the Turbo has 615 horsepower and the same 625 pound-feet. So you can see that the GTS fits right in between the 4S and the Turbo. In fact, kind of almost more on the Turbo side of things, which is pretty neat. But of course, being a Porsche and a performance-oriented one at that, the Taycan GTS is pretty expensive. The 4S model starts around $105,000. The Turbo starts in the low 150s, like $152,000. This starts around $132,000 for a regular Taycan GTS sedan, or if you want the wagon version, the Sport Turismo like I have here, it's going to be an extra $2,000, $135 grand. And of course, that's before options. And in Porsche world, options are plentiful, and so you'll be spending a lot more. But of course, you'll be getting a lot, and that includes some insane acceleration numbers. Porsche says the regular Taycan 4S does 0 to 60 about 3.8 seconds. The Turbo does it in about 3. This is 3.2 seconds 0 to 60, which is a very, very impressive figure. And Porsche pointed out to me that the Taycan GTS sedan and the Sport Turismo have the same acceleration figures. So if you do get the wagon, you want a little extra practicality, you won't be penalized in terms of performance, or at least not in terms of acceleration. And there are many other benefits to the Taycan GTS than just extra power. I'm going to go through a few of them. One is retooled electric motors, Porsche told me. Better cooling, I guess, to ensure the motors won't go into like a limp mode if you're driving the car really hard on the racetrack. In fact, Porsche told me they haven't actually seen that happen driving the Taycan GTS on race laps. The motors are able to handle really heavy abuse and high performance driving. Porsche also told me that to go along with the extra power of the GTS, the extra sportiness, that the brakes are bigger than they are on the Taycan 4S. They're not quite as big as the brakes in the Taycan Turbo, but they're still bigger for better stopping power, which is important for a performance car. But anyway, moving beyond performance, there are quite a few more benefits to the Taycan GTS, and probably the most notable is to the wagon body style. This is a Sport Turismo, whereas other Taycan wagon models are Cross Turismos. Now, this may sound like a stupid semantic difference, and frankly, you're forgiven if you can't keep all these Porsche body styles separate in your mind, but it is actually a meaningful difference. The Cross Turismo models have like a raised ride height, extra body cladding. They look almost off-roady. This ditches all that stuff. It is intended to be a performance wagon and nothing else. It doesn't have like a gravel mode like the Cross Turismo models have. It is purely a wagon with performance credentials. And important to point out, this is the only model that comes in the Sport Turismo body style. All of the other Taycan wagons are Cross Turismos, even the Turbo. So if you want the sportiest Porsche Taycan wagon, that would be the GTS Sport Turismo. And the especially cool thing is with the Sport Turismo, you're not getting any of the Cross Turismo's off-roady benefits, but you're still getting basically all of the added practicality since the body is the same. So that means 42 cubic feet of cargo space, which is an excellent figure, and it also means extra rear headroom. Porsche says 3.5 inches more rear headroom than the Taycan sedan with its sloping roof. That's a pretty big deal and allows for taller adults to sit in the back seat more comfortably. And of course, there are many more cosmetic upgrades to the GTS than just the Sport Turismo body style. One, you'll see up front where it has the Sport Design front end, Porsche calls it. This is a more aggressive front end than the standard Taycan. It's offered as an option on other Taycan models, but it's standard here on the GTS. And it's the same deal around back. Porsche tells me this is roughly the same rear end design as the Taycan Turbo, so it's like more aggressive than what you get in the 4S, and it looks more exciting and sporty. Also around back, another benefit of the GTS model is a body-colored spoiler, which is not on the other Cross Turismo models. The body-colored spoiler looks a little bit sportier. The GTS also has its own unique wheel designs. This design, and there's also another one available. These are not shared with other Taycan models. They are unique to the GTS. And you can see they are painted black, which is sort of a GTS theme. There's all sorts of black accents on the outside of this car where you might find chrome or body color on a normal Taycan. Everything is black here, which is sort of a theme in Porsche GTS models in general. This black trim to make them look sportier because, well, they are sportier. And also, keeping with the black theme for the GTS, you have on the side these black side skirts, which look pretty cool. And at the back, they say GTS. Just a reminder to people looking that you have the performance-y model. And next up, we move inside the the Taycan GTS, where there are some GTS interior changes as well. For one thing, you can see there's Alcantara everywhere. The seat centers are Alcantara in the middle. There's Alcantara all over the dashboard in the center armrest. The door panels are all Alcantara, and even the steering wheel is Alcantara. Porsche calls this material Race Tex, and it's kind of a hallmark of their GTS models, but the rest of us call it Alcantara, and it's basically everywhere in here. And speaking of materials and textiles in here, there is some red contrast accents to match the exterior color. You can see the stitching on the door panel, for instance, and the seat belts are red also, but maybe most importantly, GTS is stitched into the headrests, again, reminding you that you have the cool one. Now, another interesting item on the inside is the sound. This car comes with like a sporty driving sound, even though it's an electric car and would otherwise be silent. They add a fake sound, and for the GTS, it's sportier than in other Taycan models. It's still the same basic sound, but it's like deeper and growlier, and you can hear it when you accelerate and brake. Take a listen to the GTS sound. Now, it's worth noting that you can turn off that sound if you don't want it. You can drive along silently if you wish, but it's there if you want the sporty sound, and you can toggle it on or off. Now, one other GTS item that's standard in this car is the Sport Chrono package, which is a series of sporty upgrades and technology, including this clock mounted on the dashboard, which actually functions as a lap timer when you have the lap timer going. The Sport Chrono package is optional in other Taycan models, but it is standard in the GTS, since this is the sporty one. But anyway, those are the major quirks of the GTS and the differences compared to the standard model. Next, I want to move on to some just general Taycan quirks. Like I've mentioned, I already have reviewed several Taycan models, but I want to talk about some of the basics, the most important stuff, and that means starting with the screens. Screens are a major theme in this car. They are everywhere in this interior. As you can see, screens, 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 and there's screens for just about every function. For instance, your climate controls are on a screen in the center control stack here. They're not physical buttons. You adjust everything on this screen. Now, that also includes the heated seats, which normally I don't like to see on a screen, but the cool thing in this case is their position is fixed in place. So they're always exactly where you'd expect them to be when you want to turn them on. You just tap it and they're on, which is pretty nice. Amazingly, the climate controls also require you to do a pretty insane thing with the screens, and that would be adjusting the positioning of the climate vents. So you can see the climate vents here look like they have a switch where you can adjust the position, but that's actually fixed in place. You move it and nothing happens. You have to go into the screen, and then you can move around these little circles that show where the air is going, and that's the only way to change the position of the climate vents in this car. You have to use a screen even for that simple task, just moving the vents. If you want air blowing like on your chest or your neck or your head, you gotta do it in the screen, which is crazy. And the screens continue from there. Check this out. The passenger has a screen. Over on the passenger side of the dashboard, there is a screen integrated in here for the passenger to use. So the passenger can adjust media, music, navigation, phone, all from the passenger seat without reaching 8 inches further over to the center to use the center screen. The cool benefit here, though, is you can have multiple things up on screens at once without having to go through different menus. The passenger screen can show your music, the center screen your map, the gauge cluster screen can show your phone, and then you have everything displayed at once, which is kind of a neat touch. But the result is screens, screens, screens in this interior. A couple of quirky items that aren't screens. For one, the start-stop button to the left of the steering wheel, as is Porsche tradition, but it's not a key you turn anymore. It's a little circular button you press. To the right of the steering wheel, you have the gear selector, which is bizarre. It's this tiny little stubby thing that you push down to go into drive, and you push up to go into reverse, and then you can see park is this little button over on the side, kind of an unorthodox gear lever, but that's what you get in the Taycan. And next up, we move on to the back seat in the Taycan GTS, where you will quickly discover that headroom is indeed quite nice, especially with this glass roof, which is thinner than like a full metal roof. I sit back here and I have no real problem. Even sitting really high, my head doesn't hit the roof, and that is pretty cool. Although it is worth pointing out that legroom is a bit tight if you're taller back here. This isn't a huge car, not as big as the Panamera, but it's big enough for an adult, and with the roofline flattened out on the Sport Turismo, it's bigger than before. However, I should point out that Porsche has 3 seat belts back here for 3 occupants, including a middle passenger, and I can't imagine how that would work. Not only is it relatively tight, but this center hump on the floor is pretty wide and pretty big, and I don't know where that middle passenger's legs could possibly go. So you can get 2 back here relatively comfortably, but 3 would certainly be a stretch. One other very interesting rear item in this car, you do have rear seat climate controls, but they are also on a screen. Mirroring what you see up front, you get a screen back here to adjust fan speed, temperature, heated seats, that sort of thing. And this screen even changes the positioning of the rear climate control vents. You can't even adjust the rear vents using your hand very easily. You still have to go into the rear screen to do that relatively simple task. Pretty crazy. And next up on the subject of rear seat space, let's talk cargo area space. To access the cargo area, you press this little hidden button on the bumper. You can see right here in the center. You push this and then the tailgate pops open and reveals the cargo area, which is actually pretty big. Like I said, 42 cubic feet of cargo space in this car, and that includes a lot of space in this cargo area, although the roofline of the Taycan Sport Turismo is kind of slopey. It's not as much as the sedan, but it's still not like boxy like some station wagons are, so you do lose a little space to that if you're trying to put in some like tall, boxy item. Also worth noting, there is extra cargo space under the floor. You can see it here, the charger stuff is in there, but you do have some additional space down there, and you also have extra space in front. The front trunk can pop open, and then there's your additional cargo space in case you run out of room in back or you just want to separate your cargo for whatever reason. Also, one other interesting quirk of the Taycan is the charge port door opening, which I just find to be fascinating. Here is the charge port door, and you can see there's this little like panel sticking out from it. If you slide your finger under that panel with the key in your pocket, it will open the charge port door, and that door opens like into the fender. It sort of hides itself away, which is a very, very cool touch. When you're done with that charge port door, you just slide your finger back under the panel, and then the charge port door closes right up. This is one of the coolest charger door opener situations in the entire car industry. I absolutely love it. And finally, I want to finish this tour of the Taycan with a rather interesting thing Porsche told me about the Taycan and its brand in general. Porsche told me that over the last 10 years, the average buyer age of a new Porsche has been increasing by about a year or half a year every single year. So every year, Porsche buyers are getting older and older, which makes sense because Porsches cost so much money, but it's not really the direction you want to go as a brand. You need to be attracting younger buyers. But Porsche buyers kept getting older until the Taycan came out. Just this model's presence in Porsche's lineup lowered the overall average age of a Porsche buyer by 3 years. Just this one car showing up. Pretty impressive. Porsche also tells me that 1 out of 3 Taycan buyers are new to the brand. They're not coming from another 911 or a Cayman or whatever, getting their 7th Porsche. They are brand new. So the Taycan has really allowed Porsche to explore spaces where it hasn't been before, and it's kind of provided a youthful new energy to Porsche. As for this particular Taycan, Porsche tells me the GTS, sedan, and Sport Turismo go on sale this spring or maybe early summer, so get ready if you want to get one of these. All right, driving the Taycan GTS. This thing is fast, fast, fast. The third Taycan I've driven, the first one I drove was a Turbo S, I think, a Turbo, and that was insane. But since then, my opinion of insane has changed a little bit because I've driven the Rimac Navara and the Model S Plaid and other electric cars that are absolutely incredibly fast. So this also feels absolutely incredibly fast, but that's just how expensive electric cars feel now. They all do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It's not really that much of a distinguishing feature, but if you're looking for speed, this car delivers it. The other cool things that this car delivers are twofold, and I think that this car's really big advantages are in 2 main ways. One is the general driving experience. Like I said, third Taycan I've been in now, and each one is just a blast to drive. And I think this is where some of the Tesla people don't quite get it. They say, oh, the Taycan is so much more expensive than a Tesla, but the 0 to 60 time is the same. So the performance is the same. Who would spend that much more? That's not what Porsches are about. Porsches are quick to accelerate. They always have been, but that's not the main benefit. The main benefit is the steering and handling feel. And I think that the really impressive thing that the Taycan does is it drives like a Porsche. The first time I drove this car, it was clear. It feels like a 911 when you're cruising along. And that's hard to do in a four-door car generally, but it's especially hard to do in an electric car that weighs a lot, and it was their first real effort in an electric car. I mean, there's a lot of amazing things about this, and they really nailed it. The car is super well balanced, incredibly well poised. Steering is fantastic. It's very immediate and quick. The car is excellent when you're cornering, completely flat, and just a lot of fun. The other big benefit of this car, especially over Tesla, is quite simply that it's nicer in here. You know, Porsches aren't cheaper, gas-powered Porsches aren't cheaper than their rivals either, but they generally drive better and they generally have really nice interiors. Now, they're not necessarily the highest quality interiors in terms of like overall materials. You're not like bathed in leather, whatever, but everything in here is like really like taut. Like everything is screwed together well, it's laid out properly. It's just like a high quality interior that's going to age well. No, you're not bathed in fluffy leather and pillowy chairs, but it's just really good quality stuff basically everywhere you look. And of course the brand name also plays into it. Porsche has a stronger brand name than Tesla, even in today's world. And so there's people who are buying the car because they like the thrill of that, of having the Porsche brand. I think it's difficult generally to justify the price point of a $160,000, $170,000 car, but relative to other cars, I think that this makes a lot of sense at this price point, and frankly, that's why a lot of people are buying Taycans. Now, I do want to cover driver assist technology, or self-driving as it is sometimes erroneously called, I guess, in this car. A lot of Tesla people talking about the Taycan say, well, the Taycan doesn't have autopilot, so it's not as good. It doesn't have any self-driving, any driver assist. That's not accurate. The Taycan does have a pretty good driver assist system, actually, but it isn't quite as good as Tesla. So you can set it, it will steer for you, it'll accelerate, brake for you, it'll do all that stuff, which is all fantastic. It will not do two things that Tesla does well. One is it won't lane change, which is a little bit of a disappointment at this price point because Mercedes now has lane change and Cadillac has it and Porsche really ought to. The other thing that this system won't do is you can't be hands off the wheel for very long. And when you are required to go back hands on, you got to kind of do a little jiggle of the wheel so it knows you're there. That's very annoying to me. A lot of new cars now have capacitive touch steering wheels, so they know when your hand is on the wheel that your hand is on the wheel. This car, your hand could be on the wheel and it wouldn't know it unless you're doing some sort of even very subtle motion. And I don't love that. Mercedes-Benz, Chrysler, they've all figured out this capacitive touch thing, and Porsche really needs to get with that. Now, Tesla also does not have capacitive touch steering wheels yet, but you can keep your hand off the wheel in a Tesla for like 45 seconds or like a minute, which is pretty good. In this car, it's more like 10 or 12 seconds, and so it gets annoying to constantly have to go back, jiggle, but it's a pretty good driver assist system. I used it in traffic. It's great in traffic, slows all the way down, holds the car for a few seconds, then continues on when traffic does. It's really, really good. I love an enthusiast station wagon. I've got one myself. I've had several in the past, and I love that Porsche is continuing that tradition. Even on like their most futuristic advanced car, we're still getting sort of an old school cool, you know, car enthusiast wagon. And so that's the Porsche Taycan GTS Sport Turismo. There is a lot to love here. A wagon with added practicality and great technology, and it drives fantastically, but it all comes at a pretty steep price. Still, if you're looking for a fantastic enthusiast wagon, this is it. And now it's time to give this Taycan a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here. The Taycan GTS Sport Turismo gets a 71 out of 100, which is the exact same score as the Taycan Turbo Cross Turismo I recently reviewed. That's no surprise, as the differences between the two are relatively minimal. The GTS drives a little better and looks a little better. The Turbo is a little quicker and more practical, but ultimately none of those small changes are enough to move the needle on the DOUGSCORE. All of these Taycan Turismo models are pretty cool, with a lot of excellent benefits and a big sticker price.